Welcome, my beloved listeners, to the Moral Metacyst. I'll be your host, Audacious Hand. I also go by A Helping Hand, Cedric, my real name, or simply Hand. This will be a podcast about the board game Diplomacy. Now, I use the term board game entirely metaphorically in the most obvious sense because this game is rarely played on a board anymore, and even where it is, the board is ceremonial to some extent, a kind of gesture to a deeper authenticity or history. I also want to emphasize the metaphorical nature of the board because this is not a podcast about how the game should be played, about reviewing old games and talking about what should have been, much less, and this is something you'll find that the more experienced players will often do, pushing a vision of how the game should be played that invariably benefits them. No. I want this to be a podcast that aims at leveling the playing field, particularly for newer players who don't have the same information, the same context as others. Newer players such as myself. That isn't to say that older players aren't quite welcome here, and I do think that they will get at least a kind of self-satisfied chuckle from this. Now, when I say leveling the playing field, what I mean is this. This podcast is about what happens between games. Before, after, the heartbreaks, the friendships, and also the way in which the social structures that have formed around this game not so much affect or impose upon the game, but are incorporated into the games, and in fact are part of the games. This isn't a podcast in which we will fall over ourselves pointing fingers at others for their meta while dressing ourselves up in white and virginal robes. No. We will begin from the assertion that all games are meta games, and that each game of Diplomacy or any other game contains smaller games that make it up and larger games of spectatorship, of chance, that affect what happens within the bounds of the metaphorical board. Now, I should mention that some of you might recognize me from my few seasons of coverage of the Nexus finals, and that was with my good buddy Stitches, my sensei, the founder of the Stitched Hearts, perhaps the finest diplomacy education institution there is, at least to my knowledge, as well as the infamous Go Horns Go GHG, perhaps better known now as Ed Sullivan. And Ed inspired this in the sense that I spent so many hours as an unwitting participant, a spectator, an admiring one, of his relentless cannonades and fusillades and carpet bombings of propaganda, which really culminated in his recent Nexus Finals victory. And in that sense, I thought to myself, I would be a fool to remain within this man's web rather than trying to spin a web of my own, so to speak. Now, I doubt I will have his success, but that was my train of thoughts. And I'll add that, if any of you guys did used to watch those episodes and wasted all that time with me and now want to continue, thank you. I'm just incredibly flattered. Well, enough chit-chat. Let's get down to business with this week's content. The top 5 meta empires of the diplomacy community. Enjoy. Okay, top 5 meta empires of the diplomacy world. So, as you may hear, I am wandering around the streets of Brooklyn as I record this, and that's something I'll probably do from time to time, both because I like to walk while I think, but also because I think there's something to the feeling of joining someone on a walk, and hopefully you feel like you're walking with me through the School of Athens, or maybe a forest behind the village, or here in Brooklyn. In any case, this is, I've been thinking of this in kind of my idle hours, not in any structured way, so more or less off the top of my head. Number 5, I would say would have to be Umbel, also known as Russell Dennis. He runs this diplomacy briefing website, kind of vets a lot of the articles, and in some ways, his meta is a bit harder to spot in a sense. Most people run meta empires will try to project an image of absolute fealty, or kind of control like the mortal order in some way. And Russ does do that, but he does it through like division, paranoia, right? And there is a strong moral component too. Well, like he'll like advance over his meta platforms or his public arguments, which he loves. For a game of just kind of contractual, paranoid kind of play. It very much normalizes the fact that he stabs in 1901 quite often, so I think that's a less fruitful approach long term, but can't argue with his immense success, which obviously is due to some kind of talent, I guess. But I want to put number 5. Number 4. I would have to say actually Pez de Mer, or Pezza di Merda in Italian, translates as piece of shit. I don't recall his real first name, which is odd because we've talked so much. I know so much about him, as does anyone who kind of followed his misadventures in the Nexus finals. And some might say, how could Nexus itself, right, the Nexus diplomacy server, be a meta empire? Isn't that the first order of reality? And this actually gets at a point that I will probably go deeper into in a subsequent podcast. But it is a meta framework that has been heavily manipulated at times. And even without the so-called manipulation or the kinds of meta that we tend to morally condemn, like even just the fact that a tournament has a structure changes the incentives on a board, right? The tournament itself and the scoring system is a meta game, right? People like Pez, in fact, they tend to put forward a kind of an ethical, framework where the qualitative meta, you could say, is condemned, whereas their quantitative meta is upheld. There's so much here. Pez also, he really exemplifies how really the best players, the way they manipulate people in game is simply an extension of their personality. And it's because, as we go through our lives, we develop like instinctual habits
on how to get what we want from other people. And sometimes those can become pretty self-destructive even. But if you ever played with Pez, you'll know that a classic Pez victory is to win, as he did in the Nexus finals, right? On a technicality in a three-way tie, right? More typically a very grinding game in which he ends up with the highest score among other players, and he will very much push scoring systems that incentivize that. He really will, while also upholding that as the right way to play, much in the same way Umble does, though perhaps in a way that's a little more compelling to more people, in the sense that kind of like paranoid chaotic darkness is fewer people's cup of tea than a kind of like stringent and overblown legalistic sense of justice. But I think where you can really see like Pez's game come into play is in the recent, for instance, schism between Nexus and Nexus leagues, and we'll do some investigative reporting here. In that, I'll confess, I interviewed Pez and Lex Luthor, who was kind of the belle of this kind of dissolute dance, at length. The other parties haven't really responded to me, and that's completely understandable. It sounds like it was kind of an upsetting situation, and no need to relive it. However, what I see here is that Lex is really the classic Pez pawn, right? I remember playing with him once, and he just described it as simple and easy to manipulate, very blunt. I won't say the player we were talking about. However, what seems to have happened, right, is that, and again, I don't have all the puzzle pieces here. This is mostly what I get from Pez and Lex, is, as we all know, Eric, some might call him like a bad boy. Others might say he has some severe behavioral issues. But he made certain people feel like he had some kind of transphobic bias against them, and probably there was some kind of violent talk. I will say that during my interviews with Eric, he did both kind of half-jokingly try to get the physical address of the person he had a problem with from me, and also, bragged about how well-armed he was, etc. So, for me, I have thick skin, right? I come from a kind of military family, and I've been through a lot of stuff, so, I do, for me, it's just almost familiar behavior, but I can see how it could terrify some people. But in any case, so what seems to have happened is that people called for him to be banned from Nexus, and following that, right, Pez got everyone together and managed them to kind of sign a contract, like a sort of constitution. And this is exactly what Pez would do in a game, right? He tries to get as many people on the board together, or just many groups of three, and just binds everyone to these contracts that then, because he really is someone who's more of a chess player, like he sees things, ahead, it slowly unfolds that, the contract is benefiting him, but you can't go against the kind of constitution of the group, because you will be, cast out of that group. and that's what he does. He kind of whittles the players down that way. So he gets them to sign this thing, and so there becomes a procedure for reporting someone and getting them banned. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated. So apparently, what happens is Eric, or Lex, as he's known on Nexus, he files a complaint against the people who wanted him banned, saying that he's being harassed. Oh no, I think they filed one against him first. Which, according to the Constitution that everyone just signed, does not merit his being banned. And then, it's even more common than that. It goes to like an appeals court of some kind that Pez has set up. In fact, I have no idea who's on this appeals court, how this happened. But and then Pez kind of countersues. He also is very proud. I don't know if he has some kind of legal background. He was, when I was interviewing, bragging about how great he is at documentation and legal stuff, I guess. But he countersues Eber, I believe, and I think he wins the suit or something. In any case, you can see what an incredibly arcane bureaucracy Pez is set up here, right? And it's just he really does have the talents of a truly deep state Italian bureaucrat. For instance, he promised me to give all the documents about. Promised to give me all the documents about these suits and countersuits, because according to him and Eric / Lex, they are all in writing somewhere. But classically, he said he would of course do it, but it might take some time. However, after 2 months of this, you start to realize that Pez is never going to support you into Munich and get you those documents. So I guess I'll just go forward without that. So what happens is that then this basically causes a mass resignation of the mods. This is not the first one that he's caused. But people think that's effective against him. But, for instance, when Superstition, i.e. Stitches Keith, resigned, that was the last of the triumvirate of power that came after, King Ajax, the founder of the server, was kind of semi-forcibly retired, if I understand. I think that Kez has something to do with deposing him. So Pez is now the undisputed kind of Caesar of Nexus, and Caesar's kind of putting it kindly. I'm using a Gramscian euphemism there for those of you guys who like, weird political theory. In any case, and not only that, but Nexus Leagues, he's gonna go after it. He's gonna create clones of their speedboat leagues. I think he already did that with Gunboat. So he's gonna go for the solo here. And as I say this, I can't put him at number 4, can I? I actually will move him up to. I'm moving him up to 2. Okay. So I need a new number 4 then. I'm gonna say number 4 is classified. I'm gonna say it's not classified. This might be a bit volatile of a situation for number 4 right now, but if anyone's interested, you can write me at audacioushand@gmail.com and tell me why you think I should reveal number 4. So yeah, we'll go to number 3. Got Pez at 2. Yeah, I'm gonna have to put Ed at number 3. And, you know, some would think he should go higher, probably just for sheer volume of kind of meta content that he produces. You know, and that's always been kind of part of his style. I think he actually overestimates the value of just being like, just kind of so overwhelmingly, prolix. But still, you know, the thing about Ed that makes him so, you know, kind of a really a step above, you know, people like Umbold and Pez, you know, who have that kind of like, what Gilles Deleuze would say, a kind of masochistic / constitutional approach on Pez's side, and a kind of a subversive terrorist approach on Umbold's. You know, the thing about Ed is that he is relentlessly sandbagged his skills, and it's just incredible to me that people still like buy his "I'm not good at tactics" thing, for instance. And the thing is, Ed is such a trickster that, for instance, you know, you'll play a speedboat game with him, right? And you start to realize, and he does okay, but you start to realize that he actually would rather use speedboat to sandbag himself and demonstrate his like absurd loyalty to someone, whoever his out, you know, because the identities are revealed at the end, than to even focus on like, you know, what most of us play speedboat for, which is just kind of like, well, maybe not most of us, but I played for kind of just to try to, you know, virtuoso kind of tactical, like, I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, fluff. And, you know, he's carried this kind of sandbagging out just over so many hundreds of his podcasts, and, you know, even running around that kind of carnage, whatever it is, chalet, drunkenly interviewing people. I mean, it's just, you know, he's just so, and at the same time, it does have this kind of like fatherly, disarming personality. With his, you know, a big fan of folksy sayings. You know, and also like the fact, you know, and this is something that I used to do more when I was, you know, my life was in a dark place, and so I was really good at diplomacy. You know, even his kind of slightly, you know, his tendency to be inebriated allows him for little slippery excuses, you know. He really is a slippery one. So I'm going to have to put him at number 3. I think, you know, though when this really hit me, I didn't really follow the last finals, unfortunately, and I was happy to see Ed win just because, you know, we've talked for so long. I know he's been like greedily licking his lips and like studying every single finals game for years, like waiting for this moment, even though he wants to be like, oh, I just stumbled into this, guys. There's no way he's going to try that anymore, right? Ed, you're not going to try to do that. You're not going to say you just stumbled into the finals, right? Who knows? I mean, I did listen. So, I mean, this is really came to mind when I listened to one of the podcasts. I think it was his interview with Wardy and aforementioned behavioral problem bad boy Eric Grinnell, and I just was so amazed because, like, he actually kind of let Eric scoff at him and tell him how much he owned him at gun mode or something, you know. And this is a guy who's really never won, like, you know, he's kind of a trash player, really. And you know, it's like, Ed, it's just like he just. I think that maybe this is a lawyer thing, but he not only will he like bring himself to kind of a lack of self-respect and like evasive, he almost like jumps greedily into it. Like when he hears someone like Eric be like, "You suck at tactics," he's like, "Yes, yes, I do. Oh God, yes, master." You know, it's so funny. Uh, yeah, but I was glad he won, and I really do. I do really think it was like the will of Powa that he did. You know, I think that's who I would have picked, and yeah, well, I didn't want to get all sad on you, but yeah, rest in Powa. I will always remember that guy. In any case, you know, look, he's even got me doing his meta for him here. You know, I think I even put like some video into the chat trying to like hypnotize people into letting him win. So that was 3. We got Pez at 2. Number 1. Of course, I already know who it is. So at number 1, I've got to put Brandon Fogel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right or last name right or have it, but here's the thing. You know, this is even a more striking number 1 because I'm much more familiar with Nexus stuff. Like I've only dipped my toe into this other world. You know, it's almost like. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, right? But I am really interested in kind of like anthropological phenomena, and I remember I was really fascinated with this guy David Icke, kind of in I don't know, maybe around 2009 or something. And this guy, he was one of these people who believed in like reptoids, these reptilian creatures that live underground in the hollow earth. And there's some say there was even inner sun, and they just kind of live in inverse world. In any case, you know, they're behind supposedly like the Illuminati, right? Who then are behind like, you know, deep state stuff, what we would now call that. I don't think that was really in circulation at that time, but I remember listening to this talk of his, and he was said, "Oh, but the reptilians are only the reptilians are only what's behind what is generally known as like kind of behind like, you know, this world order, and there are always forces, conspiratorial forces behind what you can already perceive." And I mean, really was striking in the sense of seeing conspiracy theory reach the level of kind of, you know, medieval philosophy or something, like kind of like a kind of apophatic mystic statement. But yeah, that's how I felt when I discovered this whole DBNI meta points world that like slowly absorbed everything, you know. And really just, you know, by far the most watched and the most watched kind of meta show, though, you know, the virtual face-to-face and face-to-face world are just, they just love kind of, I'm trying to think of a word that's not narcissistic, but in which you really enjoy like accounts and like images of yourself. Someone can help me with like a word there. You know, you can write me, but it's so, you know, that, you know, even though a smaller community can be like much more active and much consume the media about their events much more avidly. You know, for instance, people just will like flock into the kind of the YouTube coverage of you know, the live YouTube coverage of virtual face-to-face tournament games. And, you know, a big thing is to make sure that in the comments as the thing's going live, you put your kind of metagaming spin on things, so that, you know, people when they're watching that, you know, as a recording, they'll see the metagaming spin, you know, and Brandon will even, you know, selectively respond to people's spin, you know. So I think notably a game where I played with Morgante, and I thought I'd convince him to like massively stab his ally, but um, it's very complicated. But he like set it up so that if I didn't stat like if it's hard to explain, but in any case, he just kind of made sure to get in there and say, "Oh no, my attempt at stabbing my ally was arranged," when in reality, it was simply like he was just covering his bases. Oh God, this game really does kind of turn into a labyrinth quite quickly, doesn't it? Especially with players as frankly, kind of amazingly powerful as him. But in any case, what I'm trying to say here is that Brandon's basically at the controls of the most prestigious and most powerful kind of media entity. Not only that, but like the scoring system that he's kind of in charge of, and presumably has a mastery of, which definitely exceeds mine. That's not saying much, but it does kind of it gives him an amazing, at least you could say, perspective on the game. Like that of a tower overlooking a kingdom, right? And it seems to be borne out in his like fantastic results, and that belie, in fact, a reputation that he is quite a mercenary, right? So, and he had a very likable one, it seems. Now, to be frank, I don't know him well enough to, if I was going to extend this philosophy about how personality, like manipulation is an extent of personality, that's something instinctual and not something necessarily, kind of entirely mapped out, more of a habit. I can't really give that perspective on it because I've never played with him. But in terms of the man with the most power in the diplomacy world, metaverse, I will have to say Brandon. Okay, well, I'm about to get home, so I'm going to leave it there. And thanks for listening. Bye.
What a lovely promenade, and thank you for coming with me. So, there we have it, the top 5 meta empires of the contemporary diplomacy world. The people with the most power over morality and outcomes of the game through tournament, structure, and media. Number 5, Humble the Heap, Russell Dennis. Number 4, Classified until further notice. Number 3, Ed Sullivan, aka Go Horns Go. Number 2, Pezza di Merda, the undisputed, how shall we put it, Caesar of Nexus. And number 1, Brandon Fogel, the voice and the scoring god of DBNI. Well, hopefully that was fun for everybody. It was for me. Kind of cathartic a little bit, just to speak frankly like this with someone.
So high, I know you ain't a drug